Now that we have gathered these experts, these sources together, kind of around the table and listened to what they have to say about the social behavior that we identified in our autoethnography, and by listening to them, I mean reading them, studying them, comprehending their different positions. So now that we've gathered them together, we are going to write up a description of their conversation for our academic audience. Please read the instructions for our literature review. This essay is called a literature review. That's the type of genre. Look at those instructions over and over again. Look over my video explaining it so that you comprehend what we're doing here. What we are doing is basically synthesizing different sources all talking about the same issue, but not necessarily talking to one another face to face. We're going to synthesize their key points and describe this conversation for our audience in the form of an essay. And we're going to do it in an objective manner. We're not joining the conversation yet. We're not sharing our opinions. We're not judging whether these authors or researchers or experts are right or wrong. We are simply reporting, letting our audience know what these people are talking about. Okay, so we're largely invisible. We're like the invisible choreographer of this conversation. And by synthesis, remember, synthesis simply means to take separate parts, as if we're baking a cake, take separate parts, separate authors, and mix them together, bring them together to create a whole new entity. Okay, and so we're going to take separate authors and bring them together in a very unique conversation. And so we're going to really rely on this mapping exercise that we did. The whole goal of this mapping exercise is to identify common points of discussion, okay, different common points that the authors touch on, because that is going to be kind of the blueprint, the topic sentences, the sections of our essay, these common points. We can't try and cover everything that they all talk about. And so we're going to identify, here are 3 things that several of the authors, these common points that they discuss. These are going to be our topic sentences. Okay. And our thesis for this type of essay is not going to share our opinion. It's simply going to be a description of the conversation. But remember, the thesis has to stand alone. That means the thesis statement, it can be like 1 to 3 sentences, but it has to include all of the information that the reader needs to have to understand what the essay is about, as if they had nothing else to go on. So it needs to name that behavior. Don't refer to it as it, okay? Because they won't know what it means. So it needs to name that social behavior that you're looking at. It needs to mention the experts, okay? Because they are going to be the stars of this essay. They are the main subjects. You're sharing what they wrote, okay? And it needs to describe those common points of discussion that the essay will represent, okay? And so here's an example. If we were writing an essay on teenagers' eating habits, this would be a regular argumentative essay thesis. The problem with teenagers today is that they don't eat enough green vegetables. This is an opinion, and it is presented as the author or your opinion. We're not going to do that for this, okay? Look at this second thesis. This is going to be the pattern of thesis that we're going to use for this essay, okay? It focuses on describing the researchers or experts' conversation. Okay, what does that look like? So here we go. While there is some disagreement, the majority of experts consider the problem with teenagers today to be the lack of green vegetables in their diet. Their research covers the impact of this lack on teenagers' physical, mental, and emotional health. And they offer specific suggestions on how to increase teens' consumption of healthy foods. And so this thesis, if you look closely, the reader would expect to first learn about what they say about that problem, what these authors say about the impact on teenagers' physical, mental, and emotional health. And then they're going to read about what the authors say about suggestions on how to increase teen consumption of healthy food. Okay, so you're simply taking your common points of discussion that you identified and kind of smashing them together into a thesis. So, and you're just going to describe those common points of discussion in your thesis. So let's look at the student examples, okay, that I've shared with you. Read over those examples and look for them as inspiration on how to organize this. So how do they use those common points of discussion to kind of guide their reader through the common points of discussion and who talked about them? So let's look at the first one. This is the first student examples thesis. Experts agree that adult loneliness is rampant, which negatively affects well-being. See, the experts are mentioned. Those experts need to be mentioned not only in the thesis, but in every single topic sentence. So because you are objective, you want to make sure that your reader knows that you're just describing what other people have to say, what their opinions are. So, therefore, they emphasize that forging friendships is important even though it can be difficult. Okay, so that describes the conversation. And if you break down all of the thesis or the topic sentences from this student's essay, you can see this pattern of common points of discussion. Okay, who talked about those common points? Another common point of discussion. Okay, who talked about that common point? Third common point of discussion, who talked about that? Okay, and some of these are overlapping. Some of your authors can talk about several of these different points. That's normal, that's expected. So look over this. Okay, so this first one, a rise in loneliness as well as a drop in the number of friends that adults have, are both demonstrated in the available research. And they share what these two authors mention about that common point of discussion. So look at these topic sentences. Look how they emphasize the authors that have been synthesized. And again, here, I'm not going to read this, but this is the second student's example of a thesis and their pattern of organizing their common points of discussion, okay, and who's talking about them. Here is an excellent thesis or synthesis example. You have your topic sentence as demonstrated, as highlighted in yellow, and look at every single sentence. Introduces a different author by name. These authors are the main subjects of every sentence. That's key to a literature review. They are the stars here, okay? And look at how they bring them into conversation. It can be as easy as, sharing what one author says and then a simple transitional adverb. Similarly, okay? And then she states, and then what another author states, okay? So use that as an example. But what we're going to be doing for Wednesday's activity, there's a little overview here, but I'm just going to pull up the assignment right here. We're going to practice synthesis. And this is awkward and this is difficult, but it's important, okay? This type of synthesis work is incredibly important in just learning critical thinking skills, but it's also a type of work, a type of critical thinking work and a type of writing work that you will be called on to do throughout college, throughout different situations in your profession or your field, and also in your personal life. Okay, so it's really important. And so below here, I've got excerpts from different articles concerning 3 different conversations. Okay, one is, do service dogs offer effective support for autistic children and their families? Okay, and there's excerpts from 4 different authors or different articles concerning that question. Another one is, what is connection between poverty and literacy? And here are excerpts from 4 different articles. And then the third one, what does the issue of food insecurity among college students look like? Okay, so what I am asking you to do, please read the instructions right up here, but I'm asking you to synthesize, to pick at least 3 of these different authors and their points, something that stands out to you, and synthesize those different points into a paragraph, okay? Similar to what is found in this paragraph, okay, right here, okay? And so you are going to choose the conversation. You just pick one of these, read over the excerpts. As you read the excerpts, come up with a topic sentence that demonstrates the main point, the conversation that they're talking about. And basically it will be the answer to these opening questions. Okay, what is their position? What is that topic sentence? And then you're going to choose the points that stand out to you okay, concerning that common point of discussion from at least 3 of the authors. You don't have to include all 4, but at least 3. And you're going to pick the phrases. You're going to summarize their points. You can use small quotes if you find them incredibly quote worthy, but most of this is going to be summary work, okay? And you're going to consider, okay, how am I going to organize these different points from the authors and use the connecting phrases like, likewise, this other author, agrees, or in a similar vein, or on the other hand, this author does this, okay? How do you bring those authors together into conversation and then compose that little paragraph, okay, synthesizing that conversation, okay? Again, go back to the student examples and the slideshow, this video for inspiration, for guidance. And then for Friday's activity, you are going to simply take your common points of discussion and the authors that talk about those common points of discussion, and you're going to write out your outline, your blueprint for this synthesis, this literature review. Okay, here's an example of the first student bought the student example. You can use that as inspiration, but this will help put you on the right path for writing this type of essay. Okay, and while I'm not going to be in town, I'm not going to be on campus over these few days, you can always reach out to me through a Canvas message. I will be checking my Canvas messages throughout every single day. Okay, so if you have questions, please reach out.